I remember the rain that night. It wasn't just drizzling. It was a full downpour, the kind that soaks through your clothes in seconds. The streets shimmered under the streetlights, and the sound of water rushing through the gutters filled the silence between my own heavy breaths. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but I wasn't cold. No, the fire burning inside me kept me warm. 18 years ago, I left my entire life behind. My house, my friends, my job, everything. I walked away without a word, without looking back. Some people would call that cowardice. I call it survival. I had been married to Maureen for 16 years. We had a son, Graham. He was 14 when I left, old enough to notice that something was wrong, but still too young to understand the depths of betrayal that shattered our family. I never wanted to leave him. If it had been just the two of us, I would have fought tooth and nail to keep my place in his life. But Maureen, she made sure that wasn't an option. I found out about her affair in the cruelest way imaginable. I didn't stumble upon a suspicious text or hear whispers from friends. No, I walked into my own home, our home, on a random Wednesday night, and saw it for myself. I had come home early from work. There was a last-minute cancellation at the firm, so I decided to surprise Maureen with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I remember smiling to myself, thinking about how she'd be excited. I thought we were in a good place. The past few months had been stressful, sure, but I assumed it was just life weighing on us, as it does with any long marriage. I had no idea that the weight was coming from something else entirely. The moment I stepped inside, I heard them. At first, I thought she had the TV on. It wasn't until I set the bag of food down on the counter that I noticed something off, the kind of silence that comes right before everything collapses. The lights were dimmed, the living room was empty, but the sounds coming from upstairs, they made my stomach drop. I don't know why I went up. Maybe I thought I'd find some other explanation. Maybe I wasn't ready to accept the truth staring me in the face. But the truth didn't wait for me to be ready. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough for me to see everything. My wife. Another man. My bed. I don't even remember breathing. I don't think I did. My body just froze, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were taking in. And then Maureen looked up. Our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw something that still haunts me to this day. Not guilt, not regret, not even shock. Just annoyance. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. She didn't even try to cover herself. She just sat up, ran a hand through her tangled hair, and sighed. I was going to tell you, she said, as if that changed anything. As if that sentence erased the image now burned into my brain. I didn't speak. What could I say? The man, some smug-looking guy I had never seen before, actually had the audacity to smirk at me. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to drag him out of my house, out of my life, and never see his face again. But all I did was stand there, numb. And then Maureen said something that snapped me out of it. You should go. You should go. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Not even a pathetic attempt at justifying herself. Just a cold, dismissive command, like I was some stranger intruding in her life. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was something she had accepted a long time ago. So I turned around, walked down those stairs, grabbed my car keys, and left. Not just the house. Not just the town. I left everything. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just the sound of my tires splashing through the rain as I drove into the unknown. For years, I wondered if I had done the right thing. If leaving without a fight, without demanding answers, made me weak. If Graham hated me for abandoning him. But I never regretted it. Not for a second. And now, 18 years later, he's the one who found me. And he has a truth of his own to reveal. For 18 years, I lived in the shadows. I built a life where no one knew my name, where I was just another face in the crowd. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fulfilling, but it was safe. No reminders, no pain, no past. But the past has a way of catching up with you, no matter how far you run. When I saw Graham's name on my phone screen, my heart stopped. I had changed my number countless times over the years. I had no social media, no digital footprint, nothing that could tie me back to the life I left behind. And yet, there it was, his name, glowing on the screen like a ghost from another life. I didn't answer right away. I just sat there, staring at it, my fingers shaking over the screen. A part of me thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone else had this number before me. Maybe it was a cruel coincidence. But deep down, I knew. I hit answer before I could talk myself out of it. For a moment, There was only silence. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in nearly 2 decades broke through. Dad? The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. Graham. My voice barely worked, hoarse from shock. There was a shaky breath on the other end, like he had been holding it in. You're alive. I closed my eyes. Barely. Yeah, I managed. I'm alive. He let out a breathy laugh, one that was more disbelief than humor. I didn't think I'd ever hear your voice again, he admitted. I looked for you, you know, for years. Guilt twisted inside me. Of course he had. I was his father, and I disappeared without a trace. I swallowed hard. How did you find me? There was a pause. Mom. Just hearing that word sent a chill through me. I had spent 18 years trying to forget her, trying to erase the sound of her voice, the weight of her betrayal. And yet, in a single word, she was back. What does she want? I asked, my voice harsher than I intended. Nothing. She's gone. I blinked. Gone. He hesitated, then sighed. She passed away last year. I didn't feel anything. Not relief. Not grief. Just nothing. Like a stranger had died, not the woman I had once promised my life to. Graham must have sensed my silence because he quickly added, I didn't call about her. I called because of me. That got my attention. There's something you need to know, he said, his voice lower now, almost hesitant. Something I only found out after she was gone. I leaned forward, gripping the phone tighter. Tell me. Another pause. Then, the words that would change everything. Dad. I know the truth. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What truth? I whispered. There was a deep, steadying breath on the other end. The truth about why you really left. My blood turned ice. I thought I knew why I left. I thought I was the one who made that choice. But something in Graham's voice told me that there was more, something I never saw, something I never knew. And for the first time in 18 years, I was terrified of the truth. My hands felt numb. My entire body did. I sat there, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, staring at the empty motel room around me. The faded wallpaper, the hum of the old fridge in the corner, the rain pattering against the window, it all felt unreal, like I wasn't really here. Like the past was reaching through time to drag me back. What do you mean, Graham? I finally managed, my voice hoarse. I know why I left. I had to leave. There was a pause on the other end of the line, heavy and uncertain. I heard him exhale, like he was debating how to even begin. I used to think that too, he admitted. For years, I told myself that maybe you were just done with us. That maybe you couldn't handle what Mom did and you ran. His voice wavered, like the words themselves were painful to say. I was angry. I hated you for leaving me behind. I thought, if you loved me, you would have stayed. I squeezed my eyes shut. The weight of his words crushed me. But I was wrong. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? When Mom died, I had to clean out the house, he said slowly. I went through everything. Her things, her papers, her emails, and that's when I found it. Found what? His breath hitched. A letter, Dad. From you. The room spun. That wasn't possible. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She never gave it to me, he said, his tone thick with emotion. You wrote me a letter before you left. I know because I found it hidden in one of her old boxes. She never sent it. She never let me see it. I felt like I was sinking. That night, the night I left, I had written him a letter. I had stayed up for hours, my hands shaking as I put everything I could into those words. I told him I loved him. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him I wanted to stay, but I couldn't. And she hid it from him. I gritted my teeth, my jaw clenching as something hot burned inside me. I had spent years believing Graham knew why I left, believing he had at least some part of the truth. But she had stolen even that from me. She wanted me to hate you, Graham continued, his voice cracking. She let me believe you were a coward, that you abandoned me without a second thought. And I believed her. I believed her, Dad. I pressed my fingers to my temple, trying to steady my breathing. I wanted to find you for so long, he said. But she made sure I never could. She changed my number when I was a kid. She threw out anything that connected me to you. When I got older, I tried to track you down, but it was like you had disappeared off the face of the earth. My stomach twisted. That was exactly what I had done. But after she was gone, he went on, I kept looking. And then I found something else. I hesitated. What? There was a long pause. A name, he finally said. The name of the man she was with that night. I felt my entire body tense. I always thought she had just cheated on you with some random guy, Graham admitted. I never knew his name. I never cared to know. But then I found it. She kept old messages from him. Emails. Bank transfers. And I realized. I could hear his breathing quicken. She wasn't just cheating on you, Dad. He swallowed. She was planning something bigger. My pulse pounded in my ears. What are you saying? That man, he wasn't some fling. He was in her life for years. Even before you found out. And after you left, they got married. He moved in. And then, they started cutting me off from everything that had to do with you. I felt sick. I don't think she just wanted to be with him, he whispered. I think she wanted you gone for good. I gripped the edge of the table in front of me. Gone. I echoed, my throat dry. Dad. I think they wanted you out of the picture entirely. My stomach twisted into knots. 18 years. 18 years I had spent blaming myself for leaving. 18 years believing that I had chosen to disappear. But what if it wasn't just me who made that choice? What if they had made sure I never had a reason to come back? I sat in silence, gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. My thoughts swirled like a storm, crashing into each other, forming a chaotic mess of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. For 18 years, I had been running from ghosts, ones I thought I understood. The betrayal, the humiliation, the shame. I had carried them with me every single day. But now, Graham had unearthed something I had never even considered. I thought I left to escape. But what if I had left because I was meant to? What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Graham hesitated. It wasn't just the affair, he finally said. It was the way she talked about it. The way she acted after you left. She didn't just move on, she erased you. She never talked about you, never let me ask questions. If I did, she got weird. I swallowed hard. Weird how? She would shut down completely. If I pushed, she'd get angry. Defensive. Like she was afraid I'd figure something out. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. Graham, I said carefully, what aren't you telling me? There was a long, heavy pause. I think they were watching you. The words slammed into me like a fist. I froze. What? I found emails, he said quickly. Old ones. At first, I didn't understand them. But they were from that man, Daniel. That was his name. He and Mom were tracking you. A chill ran down my spine. I don't know how, Graham continued. But they had records of where you went after you left. There were messages about different cities, addresses, even the names you used for jobs. My stomach clenched. I think they wanted to make sure you never came back, he said. And if you did? I don't think they were going to let you stay. A deep, uneasy feeling settled in my chest. 18 years ago, I had felt something. A quiet, nagging fear that had kept me from looking back. At the time, I had assumed it was shame. I had told myself that I had left because I couldn't bear to face the life I had lost. But what if it wasn't just me who had made that decision? What if I had felt something lurking beneath the surface, something I couldn't put into words? Something dangerous? I pressed my hand to my forehead, trying to steady my breathing. How long did this go on? I don't know, Graham admitted. The last email I found was from about 10 years ago. After that, nothing. 10 years. I repeated, my voice raw. They had been watching me for 8 years after I left. That realization made my skin crawl. Why would they stop? I muttered, half to myself. Graham was quiet for a moment. Maybe they thought you were gone for good. Maybe they figured you weren't a threat anymore. Or maybe they had found what they were looking for. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Did she ever mention Daniel before? Even before I left? He hesitated. Not that I remember. But after I found those messages, I started thinking back. And I do remember something. What? One night, when I was really little, maybe 6 or 7, I woke up because I heard her talking in the kitchen. It was late, and I was groggy, but I remember her saying something like, I can't do it yet. Not yet. He still trusts me. A sickening feeling twisted in my gut. At the time, I thought she was on the phone with a friend, Graham continued. But now, I think she was talking to him. I felt cold. Had it really started that early? Had Daniel been in her life that long? Had I been living with a stranger for years without even realizing it? I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to focus. Graham, what do you want from me? His voice softened. I don't know, he admitted. But I do know I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't pretend like none of this matters. I exhaled shakily. For 18 years, I had let sleeping ghosts lie. Now, my own son was asking me to wake them up. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I realized. I wasn't sure I was ready to face what they had to say. I didn't sleep that night. After the call ended, I just sat there, staring at the wall of the cheap motel room, the weight of Graham's words pressing down on me like a boulder. The past wasn't just creeping back, it was crashing over me in waves, dragging me under. For years, I thought I had been the one in control of my own choices. I thought I had walked away. But now, the cracks in that belief were widening, and the truth hiding underneath was something I wasn't sure I was ready to see. Maureen had watched me. She and Daniel had tracked me. For years. What had they been waiting for? I got up and paced the small room, rubbing my hands over my face. The air was thick with the smell of old cigarette smoke, the buzzing neon light outside casting an eerie glow through the window blinds. I had been running for 18 years, thinking I had left the nightmare behind. But maybe I had been living in its shadow all along, too blind to see it. And then, a thought struck me. Graham said they had watched me for 8 years before stopping. But why? Something must have happened. Something must have made them stop searching, stop tracking, stop caring. I grabbed my phone and called Graham back. He picked up on the second ring. Dad? He sounded surprised. Everything okay? No. Nothing was okay. Nothing had ever been okay. I need to know, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Did you find anything about why they stopped watching me? There was silence on the other end. A long, hesitant pause. Yeah, he finally said. I think I did. A chill ran through me. What? I found something in Mom's old email drafts. She never sent it, but it was there, like she had written it and just never had the nerve to hit send. He inhaled sharply. It was addressed to Daniel. My stomach tightened. What did it say? Graham hesitated, then read it aloud. It's done. He's not coming back. He thinks it was his idea. I don't think we have to worry anymore. The room spun. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was still breathing at all. She had planned it. The fights. The coldness. The way she barely reacted when I found her cheating. The way she dismissed me like I was nothing. I had spent years blaming myself for leaving, but I had played right into her hands. She wanted me gone. She wanted me to think it was my choice. And I had fallen for it. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, gripping the phone. Graham, are you telling me that everything I thought I knew about that night was a lie? A deep sigh on the other end. I don't know, Dad. But I think there's more to this than we ever realized. I let out a bitter laugh. You think? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall, break something, undo everything. But none of that would change the past. None of that would give me back the years I had lost. I thought about the younger version of myself, the man who had stood in that doorway, watching his wife betray him, feeling like his entire world had shattered in an instant. That man thought he had lost everything that night. But he had no idea how deep the betrayal really ran. I clenched my jaw. What do we do now? Graham was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I don't know, but I think it's time we find out the whole truth. And for the first time in 18 years, I realized. I wasn't just running from my past. I was chasing it now. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I barely remembered falling asleep, and even when I did, my dreams were plagued with fragmented memories, Maureen's indifferent expression the night I left, the heavy rain hitting my windshield, the suffocating loneliness that had followed me for years. I grabbed my phone, my heartbeat already quickening when I saw Graham's name. You're up, he said the moment I answered. Barely, I muttered, rubbing my eyes. What is it? I found something else, he said, his voice tight. Something you need to see. I sat up. What do you mean? There was a long pause. You need to come back. My stomach clenched. Back. I know it's the last thing you want, he admitted. But I'm telling you, Dad, you need to see this with your own eyes. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. What is it? I don't want to say it over the phone, he said. Just come. Please. I hesitated. I had spent nearly 2 decades making sure I never went back to that place. I had scrubbed my old life from my memory, buried it so deep I thought it would never resurface. And yet, here I was, chasing a past I never wanted to face. Fine, I finally said. I'll be there by tomorrow. I didn't tell Graham, but the drive back nearly broke me. Every road, every sign, every familiar landmark was a punch to the gut. The past wasn't creeping back anymore. It was screaming at me. The last time I had driven this road, I had been running away. This time, I was walking straight into the fire. When I finally pulled into the driveway of the house where I had once lived, I just sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. The place looked different, but the ghost still lingered. The door opened, and Graham stepped out. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at me like he wasn't sure I was real. Then he stepped forward. You look older, he said, giving me a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. So do you, I replied, voice tight. He motioned for me to follow him inside. The house felt wrong. It wasn't the way it looked. It was the feeling, like the walls had soaked in all the lies, all the secrets, and they were still watching. Graham led me to the dining room, where an old wooden box sat on the table. It looked worn, the edges scratched, and faded with time. I found this in the attic, he said. It was hidden under a pile of her old clothes. I hesitated. What is it? Go ahead, he said quietly. Open it. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of papers. At first, they looked like ordinary documents, bills, letters, old receipts. But as I flipped through them, my breath caught in my throat. The first was a bank transfer, a large sum of money withdrawn from my account 2 weeks before I left. The second was a signed document, one I had never seen before, agreeing to transfer full ownership of the house to Daniel. And then, at the very bottom of the stack, was the final blow. A letter, one written in Maureen's handwriting, one that changed everything. I picked it up with shaking hands, my vision blurring as I read the words that had been hidden from me for 18 years. Daniel, it's done. I made sure he saw us. He walked away just like we planned. He still thinks it was his choice, and as long as he does, we're safe. You were right. He never suspected a thing. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, my grip tightening around the letter as the truth settled over me like a suffocating weight. It had all been a setup. Not just the affair. Not just the coldness, the detachment. Everything. They had orchestrated it. Planned it. They had wanted me to leave. And I had played right into their hands. I must have read that letter 100 times, but the words didn't change. They stayed the same, burned into the page, mocking me. I sat there, gripping the paper so tightly my fingers ached. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow. I had always thought betrayal was something you could move past with time, that wounds faded, that pain dulled. I was wrong. 18 years had passed, and I felt it as raw as if it had happened yesterday. They set me up. They wanted me gone. And I left, just like they planned. I didn't realize I was shaking until Graham reached across the table and put a hand on my arm. Dad, he said softly, his voice cautious, like he was afraid I might break apart right in front of him. Are you okay? I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. It sounded wrong. No, I admitted. I don't think I've been okay for a long time. Silence stretched between us. I knew Mom was a liar, Graham finally said, looking down at the stack of documents. But I didn't know she was capable of this. Neither did I. I had spent years convincing myself that Maureen was just selfish, unfaithful, a woman who fell out of love with her husband and made terrible choices. I had spent years blaming myself for not being enough, not attentive enough, not strong enough, not good enough. But this was something else entirely. I pushed back from the table and stood up abruptly, running a hand through my hair. I felt like I was suffocating in this house, in the memories it held. They robbed me of my own life, I muttered. They didn't just betray me. They stole my future, my home, my family. I had lost everything, and all this time, I had believed it was my own fault. Graham was watching me carefully. There's more, he said hesitantly. I turned sharply. More, he swallowed, then reached into the box and pulled out another piece of paper. He hesitated before handing it to me, his expression unreadable. I snatched it from his hand, scanning the words. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was an old form, slightly yellowed with age, but still legible. Then my eyes landed on the section labeled Birth Certificate Amendments, and my heart stopped. My name, my legal name, had been crossed out, and in its place, Daniel Carter. I felt my stomach drop. My vision blurred, my fingers tightening around the page as I struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. They changed my name on your birth certificate? I whispered. Graham nodded slowly. I never knew, he said quietly. I grew up thinking he was my legal father. That's what all my school records said. That's what my driver's license said. That's what was on everything. He exhaled shakily. I didn't even know I had a different father until I went looking for you. The room seemed to tilt, the weight of this revelation crushing down on me. She didn't just erase me from your life, I said hoarsely. She rewrote history. All this time, I had imagined Graham growing up with some version of the truth, maybe a twisted version, one filled with bitterness and resentment, but at least some part of me still existing in his past. But no, she had erased me entirely. My son had spent his entire life believing another man was his father, and I had let it happen. I staggered back, bracing myself against the counter. My mind raced, trying to piece it all together, but the pieces didn't fit. How? How? How had she been able to do this? How had she changed something so fundamental, so permanent, without my consent? And then it hit me. The bank transfers. The forged signatures. The woman I married hadn't just been a liar. She had been a master manipulator. She had planned everything from the affair to my departure, to the complete erasure of my existence from my own son's life. And Daniel? He had helped her do it. A sharp wave of nausea rolled over me. I gripped the counter tighter, forcing myself to steady my breathing. "Dad," Graham said cautiously, stepping toward me. "I know this is a lot, but I need you to know something." I looked up at him, barely able to speak. He met my gaze, his expression fierce. "She might have tried to erase you," he said, "but it didn't work. I found you." His voice wavered slightly, but he kept going. "She lied to me. She lied about everything. And I spent my whole life believing those lies. But I know the truth now." His jaw clenched. "And I'm not letting her take anything else from me." I swallowed hard. For the first time since that phone call, I realized something. I had been alone for 18 years. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had a son. And no matter what Maureen had done, no matter how much of my past she had stolen, she hadn't been able to take that. For 18 years, I had been a ghost. A man without a past, without a family, without a reason to look back. But now, standing in the home I once lived in, looking at the son I never stopped loving, I realized something. I wasn't a ghost. I had just been buried. And now, it was time to dig myself out. Graham and I spent hours going through the documents, piece by piece, unraveling the web of lies that Maureen and Daniel had spun. The money transfers, the forged signatures, the court records that had been quietly altered to erase my existence. It should have made me feel helpless. It should have left me broken. But it didn't. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I wasn't drowning in the weight of my past. I was fighting for my future. And I wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, Graham and I started to rebuild. Not just the past, but us. He took me to his apartment, a modest place, but filled with warmth. He introduced me to his friends, told me about his work, showed me pieces of his life that I had missed. And slowly, I let him into mine. I told him about the years I spent drifting from city to city, working odd jobs, never staying in one place for too long. I told him about the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if he hated me, if he even remembered me. And one night, as we sat on his tiny balcony, looking out over the city lights, he said something that changed everything. "I don't care what Mom tried to make me believe," he said, his voice steady. "You're my father. And you always will be." Something in me cracked. For so long, I had been afraid that I had lost him forever. That even if he found me, it would be too late. That the damage would be too deep. But it wasn't. We still had time. One morning, Graham handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, frowning. "Just open it," he said, grinning. I tore it open, my eyes scanning the words inside. Then I froze. It was my name. My name. On his birth certificate. He had fixed it. "I went through the legal process," he said. "I wanted to make it official." I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest aching in a way I couldn't describe. For 18 years, I had been erased. And now, I was back. I looked up at him, blinking hard. "Graham." He just smiled. "You're my dad," he said simply. "It's time the world knew it." I won't lie and say everything was perfect after that. It wasn't. There were still scars. There were still moments where the weight of the past tried to pull me down. But I wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in a long, long time, I had a reason to move forward. I had a family. I had a future. And no one was ever going to take that from me again.